Yeah, thank you for the clarification.
One second, okay. All right. So today we start our first block, first unit in research. And why do we always talk about research and stats in the same breath is because they are completely interrelated, right? Even when we take our project in the second year, both these subjects are going to be very, very useful. Today's topic is very general, and you will come across most of the terms which will be done in both stats and research in the coming days. Okay. So why do we, when we are psychologists, why are we talking about research in the first place, right? The thing is that how it affects us, what is in it for us, is that basically we want to always know how a person is behaving, why that person is behaving in a certain way, why are we different, why are these people different, why, what is the similarity between these people. So as psychologists, it is very important for us to this particular research, understanding of this is very important, because we may have to do a lot of research, scientific research ourselves also in the field of psychology, right? Now let us look at some very simple examples which relate to us as psychologists. So some of the examples are here. Investigation looking at whether stress levels influence how often students engage in academic cheating. So if the stress levels are high and they have not studied, they may indulge in academic cheating. So we can, as psychologists, we can look at this particular factor. The next one is about how caffeine consumption can impact the brain. Then we have different studies on whether men are more depressed or women are more depressed. We can also study about how attached children are, what are the different attachment styles among children of both divorced parents as well as parents who are married. So if you look at all these examples, these are all very day-to-day examples, right? These impact our life. It's not that these are something which we have no, as research scholars or as psychologists, all these things are day-to-day things which we want to find out, we may need to find out. But how do we find out? So there's a very systematic and scientific approach to do it, and that's what these two entire subjects talk about, right? And that's why there is so much stress on this, because see, we can just learn theories, we can rattle that off, but what next? How do we become true psychologists? Only when we start questioning or we start looking at patterns, and we want to know if what we are thinking is right, and for that we need to scientifically study it, right? So that is the purpose why we as psychologists in MA psychology are studying research. Now research, okay, searching for something new, and again a new way of looking at things, right? There may be a lot of things which are already there out, we can look at them, we can, so how do we study it with a new perspective? That is why it's called research. Like Burns, look at the way he defines it: a systematic investigation to find answers to a problem. So first of all, that problem has to be very, very well defined. We should know exactly what we are researching on, right? So that clarity has to come. Now let's look at the criteria of a good research, right? So first and foremost, the purpose of research should be clearly defined. Very, very important, right? Why are we even doing it? It takes a lot of effort, it takes a lot of time, money, effort, energy. So we have to be very clear about what is it worth even spending that kind of time and effort? So that purpose has to be very, very clear, right? Some common concepts should be operationally defined. What this means is that let us not assume that if we are saying that we are researching on some adolescent behavior, we have to very clearly define, according to me, who is an adolescent. I have to very clearly, specifically define the age, right? If I'm saying I am, researching some ninth grade students. Now, ninth grade students, where? Is it in a private school? Is it in a government school? Is it in a district? So it has to be very, so my definition, my operational definition of what that term means when I am, researching on a particular topic, all those definitions I have to define. When I say student, what is a student? When I say adolescent, what is he? So that has to be very, very clear. Research procedure should be precisely planned, focused, and described to enable other researchers in further advancement. So research doesn't stop here, just with me researching on something and producing my research result or this thing, right? It should be useful for future. It should be useful by other researchers, all right? And it should be carefully planned to generate results to maintain objective. It has to have that, it has to be objective, right? I cannot get swayed by emotions. So it has to be, if you look at all these things, these are all very scientific. It has to be very systematic and step by step. There has to be a proper planning. Purpose should be clear. Everything should be clear about a research. It's a very, very detailed level of planning and execution. Research reports should be frank enough to gauge effects of the finding. When we look at the report towards the end, after doing all of that, it should have, it should be a very frank, up, straight up report. There should be no ambiguity. There should be no diplomacy. It has to be a very frank report with proper scientific, techniques used, right? And data analysis should be adequate to reveal significance, and the method of analysis employed should be appropriate. Now, when you notice here, we are talking about the significance of that particular research. We are talking about what method we are using for analysis. Already stats has started coming in here. This is why stats and research are so closely related, because we are using statistics to do our research study. Validity and reliability of data should be examined carefully. These are again very, very important topics. All these actually are separate chapters. What is validity? What is reliability? How do we make sure that a particular research is valid and reliable? Okay, so validity means whatever we are trying to test, the degree to which a test is being measured. Okay, does it actually, whatever we are trying to measure, is it actually measuring that, right? So we'll see many, many examples when we do. This is just, I think, the next chapter after this. What is a valid research? What is a reliable research? Reliable research means that, every time we do the research, it should have similar result. It should have the same result over a period of time. We will look at these concepts more as we progress, right? All right. Now, what are the objectives of a good research, right? Now, we do research for all these purposes. These are the different purposes of, why we even conduct research. These are the objectives, in other words. One is to gain familiarity with the phenomenon, or to achieve new insights into it. So we explore. For example, I think the best example now is Corona, COVID. Why is it happening? We are exploring more into it. There are something that, it is impacting the world in this way. So that kind of a research, right? What is this whole phenomena? What is happening? What exactly is taking place? So that is why we do a research. Second one is that, if we want to identify some characteristics of a particular individuals, why they behave in a certain way, what are the situations in a different situation, how they, respond, or how does a group respond to certain things. So this is more in terms of descriptive research, right? And again, we want to see the frequency of something which is happening again and again, right? So this is the diagnostic research, right? Why this child is in a class, he's failing in maths, he's doing well in other subjects, but in maths he's just getting 2 out of 100, 4 out of 100. So then we have to use diagnostic research. And we also do it for hypothesis. Again, this is another term. We'll be doing a lot of this in both in research and stats. We'll be testing those hypotheses. We'll see the relationship between two variables. Now, would somebody like to add some examples to these type of researches? Praveen, if you're around, would you like to give some examples? Or anybody else?
Yeah, so basically, from the research point of view, right, it can be, you can say that what hypothesis is the main problem statement that we are actually investigating. So it could be so many types of these hypotheses, not just about relating the variables. It can be even, for that matter, somebody made a statement saying that, let's say, just as an example, right? So, a simple thing is like, okay, whoever actually eats the ice cream, they become fat. Okay, so this is something as a statement which is true or false. It is not about so basically it could be any such statement which is something that you would want to really prove is what is hypothesis. In this case, you are actually relating ice cream and fatness. So this is correlating whether ice cream is correlated to fatness or not. In certain cases, it is not about correlation as well, right? So it can be various types of problem statements. In this, we are actually going to read through a couple of types of these types of researches in our statistics. But as such, there is actually a wide variety of hypotheses which are possible. But nevertheless, the meaning of hypothesis doesn't change. It is the main core problem statement that we are going to do research on. And believe me, I think both across RM, that is research methods, and also statistics, hypothesis is the most common word that you would actually encounter in all the problems, in all cases.
Absolutely.
So it is so there are types of hypothesis and other things which are anyway details that is going to follow up in the other session, which Madhavi is going to take it in future. But as such, this is just giving an overview in terms of what are the various quadrants of the research. What is the good research really called? If somebody is confused about the problem statement of research, then it can't be a good research. You don't even know what you're researching on, right? I mean, that is where the hypothesis is also mentioned over here. But apart from hypothesis as well, I think Seema gave already a list of good characteristics which are there, and few other things would actually follow like in the next topics.
Right. Thank you, Praveen. Yeah, so these are the different objectives why we need to research. So just get familiar with all these terms. We will be using this a lot. Now, what are the qualities of a good research? Okay, it should be very, very systematic. There are a set of rules to be followed. It is in a particular sequence. See, even when you saw that we were doing that effect of queuing, there is a particular procedure which is followed. You just don't take a sheet of paper and give it to any random person and say, okay, let's start it. You have to make them sit down. You have to make sure they are comfortable. You have to read out the set of instructions, whatever we've done in the practicals. So there's a system which we follow. It's all very systematically planned, designed, and executed. So a research is always very, very systematic. It invites creative thinking. What is creative thinking? It has to be something new. Obviously, a research, whenever you are on a research project, it has to be something which is new, something which is out of the box thinking, something which has not been found earlier. Or even if something is found, this is a new person, a different way of looking at it. So that is very important. And you cannot use guessing and intuition in arriving at conclusion. It's a very scientific study. So you cannot, all these things don't work. Your guessing and intuition and all that. It has to be very, very, everything has to be proved, right? And a good research is empirical, which means that, the research data and everything is drawn from real life experiences. There has to be an evidence. You cannot just assume, you cannot just gather some data from somewhere and, just put it together. It has to be from real observations, real life experiences. Generally, that's how research takes place, right? It has to be valid. It has to be verifiable. You should be able to see, that's what the precise observation, accurate description. So everything to the T. That's why it's called scientific. These are the reasons why it's called scientific, right? And it has to be reliable. We have to use valid instruments to collect data. You will learn a lot about the different instruments that are used. You can use interview method, experimentation. So there are instruments, there are methods, there are observations. So as we proceed in all the other chapters, one by one, we will take these up, right? And we use, that's a spelling mistake, we use statistical measures for accurate description of the result. Again, here, look at this. How do we make it valid? How do we verify it? Because we are using statistics. We are using statistical tools, statistical tests to do our research and prove and come up with a conclusion. It is very logical. There is reasoning, there is logic. If you know of inductive method and deductive method, right? So inductive method is specific to general, right? Whereas deductive method is general to specific. I think it's written wrong in our textbook. We can verify that. As far as I know, I think inductive method is something like, it is used for development of a theory, right? So yeah,
So
can somebody, yeah, please go ahead.
So basically, it is like one is to say, let's say you have details about very specific thing. Okay, so let's say you conducted some study on, let's say, ducks in the particular region, right? So from there, if you can deduct some logic and generalize, okay, then that is called as an induction. So basically, what you are actually doing, you are taking some specific cases, logic, and then you are trying to actually mix up and trying to form a general principle. You
Correct.
conducted a research on white ducks, and let's say you are publishing a paper out of that related to whiteness. Let's say, right? I mean, whiteness is not very specific to ducks. Whiteness is not specific to that region of it, but you are actually taking certain specific examples, mixing all various specific examples, and you are generalizing. Whereas deduction goes exactly reverse. You take a general phenomena and take that general phenomena and prove something which is very specific. So basically, these are two types of reasoning that is available. So it is basically how you can form the logical arguments, right? So these are two different methods. And these two methods are not something which can be used everywhere. I mean, it depends on the context. Somebody is saying something.
Can we all go on mute, the others? Yeah.
Okay, so these are not really something which can be used everywhere, depending upon the type of the research that we are doing, the problem statement that we are actually exposing to. These are used in various contexts, right? So this is
Right.
part of that logical reasoning as such, how you
Right.
reason it out.
Yeah, Praveen. I found an example. I was Googling for this. So inductive method is, for example, there is a low cost airline which has got delayed. Okay, it's a specific example. So a low cost airline gets delayed. What you do next is, when you are conducting a research, now you start observing 20 low cost airlines and you find that they are getting delayed. Then you form a theory saying low cost airlines always have delays, right? After all your research. So you have gone from specific to general. Whereas in deductive, you will start from the theory that all low cost airlines have delays, right? Then you will frame a hypothesis that if passengers travel by a low cost airlines, they will always be delayed. Then you start collecting data, and finally your data collection conclusion with all the statistical, you'll say, okay, 5 out of 100 airlines did not get delayed. Then accordingly you will either reject or you will accept the hypothesis. So again, if you look at this is what we will be doing in the coming days through statistics and through our research. So this is one of the ways of, that is why we say it's very logical. That is why a good thing, and that's why we use all the statistical tool to make a logical deduction out of a research, right?
Seema,
And
Seema,
yeah, Ritu.
yeah, can I give another example?
Sure, go ahead.
I mean, it's a general example of, deductive and inductive method. So yeah, it is again specific to general, like how you told inductive method. So see, one example is, suppose you have to teach the children, the meaning of noun. So you say noun is the name of a place, animals, or things. So that is specific to general. It's like a theory, and you're trying to explain them, and it could be
Correct.
abstract, right? Not everybody can understand. So this is inductive
Correct.
method. So
Correct.
deductive method is, first you tell them to look around whatever they can see and name few things. So first of all the things that you can name are noun, right? It's just that there are different types of noun. So they will
Correct.
noun objectives, people or people's names. So that is a, deductive method that is general to specific. So these are general examples. Then
Correct.
you tell them, so all the names of the people or objectives. So this is a noun.
Now, that's a theory. That's the, yeah, right. Correct. We use a lot
And
in education, deductive method and all those things. So yeah, that really.
yeah, and not only these two, there are actually multiple other logical reasoning types as well, like abduction and metamorphical interference, and I think there are various others as well, but these are
Right.
the two popular ones.
Correct. Right. So if you, so again, that's why it's logical and that's why it's very feasible, very meaningful, and this helps us too for decision making, right? Again, good research develops theories and principles we just discussed. Once we have done our research, we should be able to generalize it, that in any situation given this particular, these set of rules and this kind of research, it will produce similar results, right? So that is what a good research does. Now, again, a research is replicable. Yeah, the same thing. It should, the design, the procedures, the result of scientific research should be replicable so that any person other than the researcher can also assess their validity. So we've already seen those standardized tools. Anybody should be able to do it and produce similar results, right? So any of those experiments that we did, like those, GMA or other type of experiments that we conducted, they're all, why are they standardized? Because anywhere in the world, any place you do it, it should produce similar results. So it should be replicable, right? Now, there are two things in the research process. When we are talking about the whole process of research, we can divide it into two sections. One is the context of discovery. The second one is the context of justification. So context of discovery is when we get an idea, we gather data, we start, using our statistical tools, and then we justify it, and we make a report and we put it out in the world. Let's look at it a little bit in detail. Now, context of discovery, when we are, this is that initial phase of research, when the observations, the belief, information, and general knowledge lead someone to come up with a new idea or a different way of thinking about a phenomenon. So this is the first step of a research. You look at something and you say, has anybody looked at this before? Has it been researched upon? So that is the first time you get an idea, right? That is the initial stage of research. You come up with a new idea, right? Then, yeah, a little bit digressing, but there are certain terminologies used at this time, or certain concepts during this phase. Okay, psychological theories, so and hypothesis, variable, paradigm. You will be learning more about all of these as we move on. But just to get, just to touch upon that, what do these things mean when we are talking about, the initial stage of a research? So a psychological theory, it attempts to understand how the brain, mind, behavior, environment functions and how they may be related. The value of a theory is often measured in terms of new ideas, hypotheses that can be derived from it and tested. So when we are talking about a theory, this is what it means. It's a new idea, it's something to do. And here we are talking about a psychological theory, right? So how our brain works, how our mind works. So all that can be researched upon. Hypothesis, as we said that we're going to be talking more about it, but it's generally a tentative and testable explanation of the relationship between two or more events or variables. Again, just get familiarized with these words, variables. What are variables? And in a hypothesis, how do we frame those variables? Like, for example, can we say something like, does the intelligence level of a person determine the test result in a class? So is it that every intelligent student scores more, and and vice versa? So then we do a research on it, and so these are the different variables, like there is intelligence, and then there is the performance. So we've seen many such tests. I would like somebody to give some more examples on this. And of course, variable is what. Yeah, I'll just complete these other two also. Then if you can give an example of variables and how in real life. So variable is any factor that changes or varies in size or quantity, right? And a paradigm actually is a model of functions and interrelationships of process, a way of thinking about the world and how to study it. A complete, we say, a paradigm shift. So a way of looking at something, and suddenly, through research, you can look at it from a totally new perspective. Now, these are just terms. I've just taken it because they are part of our first unit, and these may be getting repeated. So yeah, somebody was saying something.
Yeah, a variable. So variable is something that changes, right? For example, our height and weight. To an extent, it is changing, right? So it is variable. What doesn't change is your gender. So once you are a woman, you are a woman. So that it doesn't change with your age or something.
Right.
So that is not variable. So something that is changing is variable. Yeah.
Correct. Right. Absolutely. So these are some of the terms. Just make a note. Then okay. Now this is very important.
Can you or anyone give me an example of paradigm? I didn't quite understand that the concept of paradigm. Could you explain it with an
Can
example?
anybody give any example of paradigm? Not really mentioned in our. I also didn't have time.
No, sorry.
Yeah, hello. Yeah, hello.
Go ahead.
Hey,
go
hello.
ahead, yeah.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, of course.
Yes.
Yeah, so paradigm is something I think you would have actually heard the word called as paradigm shift. So basically what happens in science is when there is a concept which really changes the entire way of thinking. For example, let's say before atomic theory, right? I mean, there is nothing called as a concept of atoms. Okay, so if somebody is proposing that theory and it is going to change basically the entire way the chemistry is going to look. Okay, so earlier chemistry might be looked in a different way. They might not have actually talked about molecules, atoms, or whatever it is. The scientific process itself is something which would have actually be different altogether. So now somebody got this theory of atoms and the atomic theory. The way that the entire chemistry thinks, that itself is changing. So what happens is in this paradigm shifts, it is very, very difficult to actually prove these paradigm shifts in a proven research pattern. So we talked about that it is methodical, and we talked about that it has to be replicable and all those stuff, right? So when it comes to paradigm shifts, the way that it changes the way of thinking. So proving in the existing context would be very, very difficult. So that is where these paradigms become so basically the way it happens itself is kind of different. So that is where this paradigm word is coming into picture. That is why it is called as way of thinking, right? How to study it, how to actually how to establish that truth. That is paradigm that we are talking about here.
No, Praveen,
Got it, Praveen.
I
Thank
have
you.
a question. Okay.
Thank you, Praveen.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
Uh,
think there's one more example I would like to share is on the, I mean, for example, previously there was the scientific theory said that the Earth is the center of the universe, right? Later on, we said, no, the sun is the center of the universe. So that changed how we viewed the universe. I think it's a shift in thinking and the way we
Right.
see the world. That
Yeah, it's a very drastic sort of a shift. I think it's a complete so
assumptions
that's
of
what I also thought, but I don't want to take a we can further go and look for more appropriate examples when it concerns psychology. So but
And
I will get the idea.
and this is one of the very important thing even in the scientific philosophy angle. So when it comes to philosophical science of philosophy, right, paradigm shifts are the ones which actually reach maximum resistance. People take tons of years to prove a paradigm shifting concept because the existing methodology which is existing, right, that itself starts rejecting it. So it becomes a very tedious process altogether. And there is a concept called as as religion, we have sentiments and some unproven concepts in the thing, right? So even science does have superstitions. And those superstitions are coming because of the, I mean, it is actually those superstitions are eradicated using these paradigms, paradigm shift related concepts actually.
Yeah, yeah.
Good point.
True, true. I think in our case, I don't know if it could be leprosy, the way people looked at that, or if it is about Dalits, or I don't know. It's a complete way of complete entire nation thinking in a certain way, at least a major part of it. But yeah, we can further give better examples. Yeah.
For example, we used to think all those who drank were drunkards and loose in character and worse people. But now the paradigm has shifted. It's become a cool thing. It's become a social norm.
Yeah.
Really. And if you don't think, you're considered weird, right? That is like literally a paradigm shift that has happened in the way the society is viewing a particular concept.
Right, right. Yeah, we'll come up as and when we come across, I think we can share it in the study group. So moving on, thanks all of you for sharing. Now we go to the biases, very, very important. We call it scientific, we call it logical. End of the day, who are the people who are doing the research? It's us human beings. So we come with our own bias, right? Now, there are a lot of different types of biases. Again, as we proceed, we'll realize variety of biases have been formed. The first one is external influences. Culture plays a very, very important role, and media, how media influences, we see it all the time. You call it the Ornov show or whatever it is. You see how people try to change the psychology, of this thing. Again, when it comes to research, it has to be this kind of bias cannot exist. It has to be universal. You cannot say that, okay, in this particular thing, culture. So that's why it's scientific, because it should not be dependent on, okay, now if it is in Bangalore, this is the result which is coming out. If it is in Delhi, it is this result. So we have to be careful about those things. Personal bias, again, my own bias, it distorts the estimating and evaluating process as a result of personal belief, attribute, or past experience. So even if I gather data as a researcher or psychologist, I think that no, this is not correct. This is probably the way I should be. This is the tool I should be using because it suits me. It suits my bias that I have against it, right? Or for it. Now, observer bias. Observer bias is the one who's actually conducting that particular research. When some events are taken meaningfully by somebody, oh my God, he is, I'm sure he's taking time to think of an answer. Definitely this must be going on in his mind, something like that, So again, the one who's observing should also not, that research should eliminate that person's bias also, right? And not taken meaningful by others, right? So then expectancy bias can affect observations of behavior by encouraging reaction to even being observed. Look, isn't this how it is supposed to be? See, you're sitting there with you're an observer, and the sample who's sitting in front of you are trying to influence their behavior. You're encouraging them to respond in a certain way which suits your research, right? And the placebo bias, which is again, we saw that example of sugar pills being given, and because the patient, those people thought that, okay, by having that they are feeling better. So these are the different types of biases. Again, if somebody wants to add some examples, please go ahead. Any examples, guys?
For placebo bias, I would like to give an example.
Sure.
Yeah, so see, it's like I want to pass the exam without even studying. So I'm just believing, I'm going to get 100 on 100 in stats and research without even opening the book. So again, that is not practical. So, we should not have beliefs without even any intentions or without any hard work. So those kind of beliefs will not work.
Yeah, so it doesn't have any logic or scientific this thing, right? So yeah, these are I think they're fairly simple. Again, if somebody can think of an example, fine. Otherwise, we can take it up by the end of the session. Keep thinking about these points, because all these are very, very important. We are going to be starting. Actually, these are not just for theory. We'll be doing our own research and project very soon in the second year. So these are the things you have to be careful about. Right? I told you the first one, Now this is coming. The first one was, of course, the context of discovery. Now this is the context of justification. Where is a research? Context of justification is the second phase of research in which results are prepared for useful communication with other scientists. Right now, here you have to use a scientific method in research. What it says is, whatever research you do, the whole idea is that you should be able to tell other researchers, other scientists, that this is the result, this is the output. So it has to be, you have to work on this aspect of research also. Scientific method is a general set of procedures for gathering and interpreting evidence in way that limit errors and yield dependable conclusions. So your conclusions, what you have made after the research is done, should be people should be able to comprehend it. People should be able to pick from that and replicate it. Other researchers should be able to take your conclusions of the research and start their own research based on that. So these are the, basically they're just divided into two. One is at the planning and execution stage, and second is at what you're presenting to the world. So basically a research is about this. And what about the scientific attitudes? Coming to scientific attitudes and values associated with the research process, procedural safeguard. These are to increase the objectivity. These safeguards begin with keeping complete records of the observation and data analysis in the form that other researchers can understand and evaluate. All the procedures in a research should be followed to the T, or everything should be recorded, documented, attached. Every data, all the analysis, everything has to be put. There should be standardization in your research. It has to be uniform. It has to follow a procedure. You have to collect data in a certain way. All subjects should receive the same instructions and be treated in the same way. All right, this is also very important. You have to, like I was saying, one of those experiments that we did, it has to be same for everybody. You cannot change that. That's why we have, most of us have written our practicals. You've seen everything is in a step-by-step, everything is written. Even if it sounds like a very simple thing, you still have to tell them in a certain order, and it has to be very standardized. Operationalization and operational definition of the concept defines that the concept in terms of how it is measured or what operations produced it. Everything again is mentioned in your report. When you finally write your report for the research, all the concepts are defined properly, how you have used the methods, what you have used, how you have gone about collecting data, analyzing data, interpretation, everything should be written in that. And of course, avoiding the biases, which we saw in the previous slide. So researchers use various control procedures to avoid biases and test hypotheses in a way that are fair and error-free. Right? So again, these are very important concepts, and we will see when we are using statistics, how we are, the level of significance and all those things will come into play. So all these things are again very important. These are all very scientific way of doing your research. Steps in research process. How do we go about a research? The first and foremost step is identification of the problem. This is the most important part of a research, because you have to identify the problem very clearly. There should be no ambiguity. You have to decide what you are trying to find out. You have to evaluate the funds. How much money will it require? How much time will it require? What's the kind of expertise that is required? Do I need to take help from somebody, right? What is the knowledge that I already have? Suppose I don't know statistics, I just know the research, I know how to go about a research, but I don't know how to use the statistical tools. Will I be able to do my research? If I'm not able to do, can I employ somebody who can do it for me? So all these things are at the first step of identifying a problem. 2 steps of formulating research problems. First of all, understanding the problem thoroughly. And second is rephrasing the same into meaningful terms. There is a way in which you write everything. There's a way in which you write your problem statement. There is a way in which you start defining your, the operative words. There is a way in which you, represent your data, collect your data. So everything is, and your problem, of course, this one talks about the research problem itself, that you have to not only know what you're doing, but you have to put it in a proper way. You cannot say that I am studying adolescents' behavior in a school, It has nothing. What is how do you define an adolescent? What type of school it is? What area is it? Everything has to be properly done. So again, we will go more into detail as we proceed, right? So this is very important to identify and even present the problem statement very clearly. For identifying a good solvable problem, investigator undertakes review of literature. This is very important. Even when you are at this first phase itself, you first have to go back and check all the literature. What is literature? It's a body of prior work. Everybody else who has worked on that particular project or on that particular area, you have to go and do your research properly. You have to go back and check what work has already been done by various people. And where do you go looking for it? You go and check out various journals, books, abstracts, indexes, periodicals. So it is this first stage itself should take you a lot of time to first understand what work has already been done, and now what is your problem that you're trying to address, and how do you frame the problem statement. And you have effective tools like psych info, where all these earlier researches and all those things are available, I think. So you should do. So this is the first step of, first of all, identifying the problem very clearly. Second thing is formulating a hypothesis. Again, everything in statistics, you will now realize you will have to first form sometimes you'll be given a problem where you yourself have to formulate a hypothesis. Sometimes your hypothesis is given and you have to prove whether you're accepting that hypothesis or rejecting it. So what is hypothesis? It's a tentative statement showing a relationship between variables under study. Right? So various variables that Ritu was also talking about, you are seeing that how, like Praveen was saying, ice cream makes you fat. Now you have to, write a hypothetical statement about that first. You have to write a hypothesis about that. And it has to be in a form of a declarative sentence. And the hypotheses are derived from earlier research finding, existing theories, and personal observations and experiences. You can't just randomly form something. It has to be formed after a whole lot of earlier research findings. You have to study that. You have to study all the theories that have been done. Whether you can even go ahead and take an existing hypothesis, and because you feel, no, that's now not how it is. I think differently, and let me research on this. So even if you disagree with the previous hypothesis taken by some other researcher, you have to do a lot of background study about it first, right? And for unbiased research, when you are doing your research, for making it unbiased, you must formulate a hypothesis in advance of data gathering. It's not that after you start gathering your data and everything, then you go back and rephrase your, or whatever, you go back and frame your hypothesis. First problem statement, next hypothesis, next step is to and so on and so forth, then collecting data and other things. So it has to be going in a sequence. You can't just randomly do any step before the other. This is also very important. Would anybody like to give an example of a hypothesis, like a declarative statement? Srivalli or somebody, can you just read out a declarative statement, which is a hypothesis? Okay, I'll just give some time. I'll move on. If somebody finds it in the meantime, you can let me know. Okay. But I think most of us have attended our stats and research classes, and we have read. I don't want to randomly say something. It has to be a proper one. So whoever can read it out, let me know. Okay.
It is basically just a guess, but an intelligent guess. There is some scientific things or facts, that you're considering, and then you're guessing.
No, I want the statement. No, I want how
Can you give a statement?
appears.
Sorry, can I give a
we
statement?
had an example
please go ahead.
of. Am I audible?
Yeah, sure. Srivalli, right?
Yeah, my
Okay.
Srivalli here.
Sure, yeah.
So we had an example of Pearson or Spearman, where we correlation between our intelligence of arts, commerce, and science.
Correct.
Right. So the hypothesis was there is no difference between the intelligence scales or intellectual levels or between these three students of belonging to arts, science, and commerce grades.
Correct.
So after the correlation is done, we come to the conclusion whether to reject that hypothesis or not.
Correct.
We come to a conclusion whether there is a difference between the intelligence levels of these three different types of subject students.
Correct. And this is exactly how it should be written. There is no significant difference between the intelligence level of arts, commerce, and science students. So that is a declarative statement. It has to be written exactly. I think you have to use these words, no significant difference. These are the things. You cannot just put any random hypothesis statement. The statement
Mandeep,
has to be.
I think Mandeep has an example. You were saying
Yeah,
something?
go ahead. I can't see anybody, so I'm just guessing from the voice of people. Go ahead, please, if anybody has another example.
No, so I was actually not thinking in this statement way, but I was just going to use COVID and vaccination as an example. So,
right.
If you are vaccinated, then the chances of having COVID.
Yeah.
Are there. But
yeah,
to use
can you make it into a declarative statement?
So what were the keywords?
I think there is no significant difference or something. I don't know if it can be used in this context, but
yes, we can use it. Say that there is no significant life threat to the people affected by COVID after vaccination.
And then we can reject or we can collect enough data
or accept the hypothesis after the vaccination works.
Correct. Excellent.
The what you're saying, no significant difference is actually after we test and we find the value and then we compare and we make that statement.
Correct.
Saying that there is no significant difference at this particular thing. But the hypothesis statement would be that people who had Covaxin are getting in serious threat or something like that. So the declarative statement is basically just a normal statement. When you finish the testing and you get your results and you check in the table, based on that result of the table, you will actually say there is no significant difference or there is a significant difference. Hence we accept the hypothesis or hence we reject the hypothesis. That is the final statement, which is later on after you have proved your done your statistical analysis.
Correct. That's the inference that we come up with. Yeah, correct. Okay, but you're getting the general point idea, right? These are all very, it has to be followed in a certain, pattern as a certain rule. All this is very important. Third point is, after you have done your hypothesis and everything, identifying, manipulating, and controlling variables. We have a separate chapter on variables where we will be talking about dependent variables, independent variables, and extraneous variables, right? So dependent variables are the ones, so the independent variables are something that, you can manipulate. And the dependent one is dependent on the independent variable. Right? And extraneous variable is something that is uncontrolled variable that may affect the dependent variable. Now, again, I would want somebody to give an example of this. We've seen that plant where, the independent variable is water and then the dependent.
So here, so basically the thing that needs to be understood in this particular chapter is when we are actually doing the research, right, there are various things that we actually take it into consideration, right? I mean, suppose if you are actually studying the same thing, right? I mean, ice cream and fatness, you are saying that you have an hypothesis saying that eating ice cream will make you fat. So now, in order to measure this, right, so you would actually go through and put a measurement process and all those stuff. There are other steps which are talking about how you are going to measure and all those stuff. This is talking about you need to actually understand what all the things that you need to actually measure. So there are various variables, right? In certain cases, some are like dependent variables. What dependent variables are? So basically you are saying fatness is dependent on ice cream eating, right? So ice cream eating is independent, right? Because it is the one which you are going to independently control that. And what is dependent? The fatness. So fatness is dependent on whatever the ice creams that you are eating. So here in this particular statement, one becomes independent variable, the other becomes dependent variable. Similarly, you have like various other types of variables as well. So in certain cases, let's say extraneous variable. If you take same example, extraneous variable is your hereditary. Some people, even if they don't eat, they will become fat, right? So how the research might be affected because of that thing. You take a person with that genes, and then your research might actually go wrong, So that is
Correct.
extraneous variable, a variable which is like uncontrollable and it is affecting from the outside. So not
Correct.
only this, there are various types of variables which you are going to anyway study in detail. So
Yes.
even if you don't understand these variables in detail now, the whole concept that needs to be understood is there are something called as variables, and there are types of variables that need to be recognized as part of your research so that your research can be conducted.
Correct.
So you need
Very
to find out how to measure fatness, how to measure ice cream eating, and all those things. So that is where identifying all these variables would be critical. You should always understand that, okay, what are the outside effects to your research? That is where extraneous variable is coming. So similarly, there are others. Anyway, we'll go through that in detail in other session.
Right. That was a great example, Praveen. Thank you. So yeah, like he said, heredity is an extra. It does affect the research study. At the same time, they are not in your control. So yeah, these are also things to be. And yeah, we will have a proper class on this. But for now, please, this is the next step that you have to work on variables. You need to manipulate certain you cannot, certain you have to control. So that is what it is. Okay. Now, moving on. Okay. Next is formulating a research design. Again, we have a full chapter on this. A research design is a blueprint of the procedures which are adapted by the researcher for testing the relationship between dependent variable and independent variable. Again, a design should be, they should be logically arranged. The measurement procedure should be very clear. Sampling strategy should be very clear. Time frame should be very clear. So again, this is the entire design. What will be your sample size? What is going to be, who is going to be your sample? What is the population? From that, how will you select your sample? What kind of tool you will use? What kind of method you will use? Will you interview people? Will you observe people? So same, again, step 4 is formulating a research design. What is the constructing a device for observation and measurement? What is the appropriate tool you will be using? Will you use questionnaire, interview schedule? Will you be using standardized tests or customize it yourself if a standardized test is not used? So all this is part of the research design. Also, how will you select your sample? How will you collect your data? Who will be your participants in that research? Right? Usually you cannot obviously do the entire population, right? You cannot say, okay, I'm going to study the COVID effect of COVID on, all the children. You cannot do the entire Bangalore, children. So you're going to take a sample. How will you draw that sample? How will you, who are these people? And whether they're children, whether they're adolescent, college students, teachers, managers. So you have to be very clear about how you're going to, take samples. And depending on the nature of research problem, researcher may choose a method. You can choose observation, experiment, case study, survey. We have separate chapters on all these case study and survey method and all that. Okay, so we will go into the detail. And researcher also decide what tools to be administered, right, on the basis of individual or group. Some of the tests can be done individually. Some of the tests are group tests, like our GMA, General Mental Ability Test. We could all take it together. Although we had our own, we were doing it ourselves and had our own this thing, but it could be conducted in a group, right? So we have to, take care of that. That's all part of the design of the research. Researcher must consider recruitment of staff and their assignment, way of increasing response rate and cost of training of staff. See, all that is very important. You have to first employ the right kind of staff. You have to tell them very clearly, give them their assignment, tell them what is, everything has to be like the cost of it and all that. You can't just, say that, oh, I will only complete everything. I'm going to sit here and do it for like 1,000 people. You can't do that. But then you have to also have people who can, like for us, who conducted it. Proper IGNOU faculty members conducted our experiment. So it was very important. It is very important to know who is conducting it, what is the technique. Okay, all that is also part of your research design. Effect of each of these must be evaluated in terms of cost, accuracy, reliability, and validity. Again, reliability and validity, completely new chapter. Again, we will come to know. So all these things have to be kept in mind, right? Next step is data analysis and their interpretation. Now that you have collected your data, Now you need to analyze it. You will now again learn about quantitative data, quantitative statistics, qualitative statistics. Okay, the purpose of analysis to make sense of the data and see what light they will throw on the problem, the hypothesis of the study, and draw conclusion accordingly. So this is very, very important. How you collect the data, what technique do you use? You will use all those Spearman, Pearson, all those different types of statistical thing to analyze your data correctly. Based on the data, you have to decide a tool. Right? Sometimes, again, in your question, the tool may not be given, right? What particular type of statistical test will you use for this particular data? So you should be, as a psychologist, you should know that for this type of data, I should use, quantitative, I should use qualitative. Again, all those ways you will have parametric, non-parametric tests and all that. How do you, choose one of the tools in parametric? How? So all that you will know as we proceed in our research as well as stats, right? Again, there are some which are single factor, there are multiple factor, bifactor, univariant. So sometimes 2 factors are taken to do a research, sometimes 3 factors are taken. So we will look at all that, factorial analysis in the next chapters, like how we are going to be analyzing the data. Sometimes it's just a one thing, like in this case, Praveen said, okay, how does the ice cream, affect your weight or something like that? But there could be 2, 3 multiple factors also that you could be taking together. So how do you, first of all, collect data, segregate it properly and all of that? All that is also very, very important. And this is where the next step of data analysis and interpretation. Again, interpretation, we have a proper table. We know that, what is it negatively correlated, positively correlated? What are the different, if it is minus, if it is 0, what does it mean? If it is -8, what does it mean? If it is +7, what does it mean? So all those interpretation, just simply collecting data and using a tool, we have to even interpret the data correctly. That is also very, very important. Finally, the purpose of carrying out statistical analysis is to reject the null hypothesis so that the alternative hypothesis may be accepted. So some of the examples that are given, null hypothesis, are we accepting it? Are we rejecting it? Again, we are going to look much in detail as we progress this month. The 6th step is drawing conclusion. Now we've done all of that. Now we are trying to draw conclusion. And investigator, after analyzing the result, draws a conclusion, and the conclusion has to now be generalized. That in any situation, given this type of people, this environment, this factor, this is what is going to be the result of the study. So you have to generalize or make a theory out of what is your research, this thing, because the next set of researchers and all should be able to replicate this. And during this phase, hypotheses are accepted or rejected. Okay, this is where the conclusion phase, this happens. Depending on the new finding, the original theory may be modified. That is also possible. If you have accepted whatever, or whatever you are researching, if it is correctly being, the conclusion is that, yes, whatever you thought the problem statement was, you are correctly analyzing and you've got a right result, then it's fine. But otherwise, you will, and in that case, you will modify the previous theory that was there, right? Which you have been successfully, you have through your research said that you have rejected that theory and your own theory or your own research conclusion has proved to be correct. So all that is drawing conclusion. And the last stage is preparation of report and publication. So this is very important. And Saundarya will, she's very fond of this report. She has already written her name against that. She'll tell us in detail how a research report should be written. This is the last stage. It has all the documents, all the steps, everything in clear terms. And the report informs what has been done, what has been discovered, what are the conclusions, what was the whole process. It has to be very clear. It has to help all the others who will be taking up this later. That particular generalization should be, or that particular research conclusion should be able, you should be able to replicate it. And publication of study in scientific journal or books and in public domain makes the work available for wider dissemination. Finally, you will put it up for the world to see. You will put it up in proper scientific journals and all, where people can, when they are searching for their this thing, your research also comes up there, your conclusions and findings, and they are able to use it. And the final thing is importance of research in psychology. Finally, can I just quickly complete this? This is the last slide. Okay. Importance of research in psychology. Okay. What, again, coming back to our first question, why are we psychologists doing it? It is very, very important in every sphere of our life. Application of psychological research findings, they have immensely helped in organization employee behaviors, in various aspects of understanding human behavior, how the mind works, in medical science, education. See, again, education here, what is the psychology of a child? In medicine, how does this, that placebo effect and all that? So again, we're looking at it from a psychological point of view. That is why all these findings have helped and we have progressed today. Empirical and theoretical research in psychology are taking place in various fields. Learning, motivation, perception, concept learning, memory, we have done cognitive in the first, this thing, we have seen how all those things we can research on, because those are again all related to psychology, and all those are research, right? The behavior, Skinner and everything, they've all done those type of whatever, that operant conditioning and classical conditioning. All that is how the psychology of a person works, of people work, right? And researchers, this helps in gauging both human and animal behavior. Of course, most of the researchers start with animal behavior, chimpanzees or whatever, rats and pigeons or everything. And practical gains of psychological research are many. Improved method of treating psychologically disordered people. This is such an important aspect. Better design of vehicles to make them easier and safe to use. New ways of enhancing performance and happiness of workers. So nature of majority of psychological researches is highly scientific. So this is the chapter, and I conclude. So thank you so much. And yeah, we can now open it for discussion.
Can we stop the recording?
Yes, I think we should.